Dynasty time, Three Dudes Fantasy Football podcast, and it's that time of year. The rookies, OTAs, you know the destinations, you know the teams, you know the coaches, and now you got to start putting your teams together. Another fantastic episode on deck because this is all about the rookies. We're going to talk from a dynasty perspective, ranking our top players at each position, also fold it in to some redraft talk and just all the fantasy football goodness that you need to know. But gentlemen, first off, what it do? How's it going?
What's going on, man?
How's it going? I'm good. How are you guys?
Doing good.
Fantastic. Ready to go. Because the rookies, they're at OTAs. And we know for some of the other players, it's voluntary. Of course, the guys that are waiting, sitting back, trying to get paid. That's another interesting episode at some point in time, too, looking at the wide receivers and the dollars that have been doled out and how that is changing the way we play fantasy football. But the focus is on the rookies. And so we know the NFL draft, and you're building a team, you start at quarterback. But in fantasy football, you usually don't start at quarterback unless it's maybe a two quarterback league or there's some crazy scoring stats. But we're going to start at quarterback because there are two really good names that I think translate in both dynasty and potentially even redraft leagues this season. But I'm going to throw it out there to you guys. I think in dynasty, there's really only two quarterbacks. If you're in a 10-team dynasty league that I might draft, depending on how many spots that you have. For me, it's pretty simple. The top five rookie quarterbacks: Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, and Michael Penix. Now, when it comes to drafting these guys, I think Caleb Williams and Jayden Daniels, no brainers, guys that you can slot in, expecting the big future. McCarthy, Bo Nix, you expect them to play. Not sure what their ceiling is, but if you're playing in a 10-team dynasty league, I think Caleb Williams and Jayden Daniels might be the only quarterbacks that you select at that point in time with kind of the depth that we're seeing at the quarterback position. But let's start with Caleb Williams and why, if you guys think he is or should not be the number one rookie quarterback outside of being the number one overall pick in the NFL draft.
Uh, Caleb Williams, in my opinion, should be drafted just because he has the potential this season to help your fantasy team. We already see that they put in a ton of things around him, right? So Keenan Allen, drafting Robert Dunze, and having DJ Moore there, like they're already putting the pieces around for him to be successful. Cole Kmet is still there, and we always say rookie quarterbacks lean on their tight end. So he's got more options, and they already have a pretty good, offensive line. They're not the normal number one team drafting, so I like Caleb Williams. I think not only does he have value in a dynasty league, but he's a potential big hit late in drafts and normal drafts as well.
Yeah, and I have that same sentiment. Um, I really like Caleb. He's got a lot around him on paper. Everything looks good. It might take a little bit to get to see that come together. I don't know if you guys saw the news of him throwing all the interceptions and stuff, but otherwise, it's like, yeah, Caleb Williams. It's easy.
Yeah, I think if you're looking in OTAs, that's a good spot to try to be aggressive and try to take some chances and build that chemistry with your team. And I think Caleb Williams, if you're looking at big upside in dynasty leagues, I could see him being a first round draft pick in your dynasty draft. Now for Jayden Daniels, I love his upside. I think you're going to get a nice pop with his rushing ability this season, but it's similar to the Bears, not in terms of as good as an overall team, but quality pieces in place. As we've discussed multiple times, the Commanders' offense is really intriguing. They're coming off a season in which, Sam Howell, they let him throw the ball around like crazy. Now, they're not going to do that with Daniels, but you look at that offense and Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Robinson, and Eckler in the backfield. He is someone that I think could be flirting with that line of someone that could even be potentially there for you in a redraft league, maybe kind of an Anthony Richardson like impact early. But to me, outside of those two guys, I find it hard of talking myself into drafting anyone else because I don't think we need to sit there and expand too much on Daniels and Williams. So what are your thoughts on the two other rookies that we know are probably going to start right away, and that's J.J. McCarthy in Minnesota and Bo Nix in Denver, because when you're looking at Michael Penix, we know he's waiting behind Kirk Cousins for at least 2 seasons in Atlanta. And Drake May, it feels like the Patriots are going to start the season with Jacoby Brissett. So how do you guys view the two rookie quarterbacks that we assume are going to start the season in McCarthy and Nix?
McCarthy's the most interesting one of the two to me, just because Jefferson, you have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison over there. So, we can't praise the Bears for having talent and then not say the same thing about the Minnesota Vikings, because TJ Hawkinson will come back at some point as well. So he interests me, but I just wasn't as excited about that draft pick as a whole. I didn't think JJ McCarthy's game will translate as quickly, and I could be 100% wrong here, right? I mean, we're taking a guess at this point, but you have to be a little excited for him just because of the talent he has around him. I just didn't like him as a prospect as much.
Yeah,
That's where I got held up on
him. It's tough to kind of look into how that Minnesota offense is going to be with him. And then the same even goes probably even for, of course, Bo Nix. It's like how Denver's offense was with Wilson. It's going to be interesting to see how that works out with the head coach there. So
Well, you drafted Bo
really,
Nix, so what do you think, JJ?
Yeah, I think that was an interesting one. It might have been an auto pick in the 3rd round of our Dynasty League draft. With Bo Nix and JJ McCarthy, what I like is they're both on teams with offensive head coaches, and Minnesota's skill position players probably are even better than Washington. And I think if you say Justin Jefferson is the best receiver of all those guys we're talking about, I think McCarthy is super interesting because this is what you want to surround a quarterback with a lot of weapons. Aaron Jones is a running back in Minnesota. He's a good option. And what I like about McCarthy is he is kind of showing people that he was a little bit more than he was at Michigan. And if you look at Alec Lewis of The Athletic, he was reporting on the OTAs, and he said one of the things that surprised him was how much the ball jumps out of the hand of J.J. McCarthy. Like he can make the throws. He said he compared it to like a pitcher that has that late life on a fastball. And I think it's going to be really interesting looking at McCarthy in this offense with Kevin O'Connell. I do think they can be pretty productive, and that's why I have him as number 3 on my rankings. Maybe, Michael Penix or Bo Nix, straight talent-wise, you might like him more, but I don't think we're going to see Michael Penix on the field for a while. And I'm not even talking about Drake May. Drake May is one that he can sit on the sidelines for me for a while, because I think there's so much work that offense has to do in New England to become productive, let alone bring Drake May along. And then for Bo Nix, the camp reports have been about the same. Benjamin Albright, KOA Radio, pointed out that he didn't make any big mistakes. He looks like a rookie, but Sean Payton has praised his accuracy, and that's what we knew the Broncos wanted in a quarterback: is quick throws, be accurate with it. And I think McCarthy and Nix are draftable depending on the size of your league, and you can leave Michael Penix and Drake May on the waiver because there's too many quarterbacks to play. And that's one of the things we'll talk about too, is finding that balance of when you're playing Dynasty League football, you're still trying to win. And so, like, how long do you want to sit on these quarterbacks? And I don't want to sit on a lot of quarterbacks in Dynasty football.
So I agree with you. I don't want to sit on quarterbacks. I think we have to kind of clarify. We play in a 10-team, 1 quarterback league. A lot of players are going to be playing in Superflex leagues. And in Superflex leagues, you're going to sit on quarterbacks because you're starting 2 every week. I am in those situations. I do like Michael Penix a lot, just because in a dynasty, this is my team for a long time. If you're playing in a dynasty, that's your thought process. And I had Michael Penix as my 3rd overall quarterback, and I still believe he has the talent, and he's going into a team with a lot of talent around him. But you are right. You're probably going to sit on him for a year or 2. So just kind of keep that in mind. You might be able to still, in a Superflex league, Michael Penix late, and I do like that.
Yeah, because that's tough. If you're sitting on him 2 years, there's also you have no idea what the next 2 quarterback classes are going to be like. And if even in a Superflex, if I'm knowing I can start 2 quarterbacks or in a 2 quarterback league, I don't even think I could hold on to Michael Penix for that long. because that's just a roster spot that's doing nothing for
I
me.
get that. I don't want to be on the other side of the Jordan Love, right? I had Jordan Love
Mhm.
when he came out as a rookie. He sat on my bench for a season, and I said I can't continue to hold on to him. Dropped him, and now he's gone. He's doing great for another team, and I'm sitting there still trying to find the quarterback because if you're good enough in Dynasty, you're probably not drafting in the top part of your draft. And in a Superflex league, those quarterbacks are going first.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing because that does change the way you look at these conversations, and you can have things ranked differently, based on the type of leagues that you play in to push up the quarterback value. But I think that the Penix to Jordan Love is a good thing to put out there because to me, I had him on the back burner, and if I'm the guy that misses out on Michael Penix, so be it. I might be more aggressive to your point if I'm in a 2 quarterback league or something along those lines. But if it's a single quarterback league, it's easier, to wait on some of these guys. But I do think it's super interesting because when you look at this season and the quarterbacks last year, CJ Stroud came in and he was the number 9 fantasy quarterback. But we know there were a lot of injuries at the position. When you can't forecast that, but that is why I think this year is really fascinating for even in dynasty leagues, like what kind of quarterbacks do you want? Because you can actually stack veteran quarterbacks and still be pretty successful in a dynasty league right now, with just the guys that are coming back, even a Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers off of injury for one season if you're waiting on one of these young guys. Now, an area in the draft that wasn't quite as popping as it's going to be in fantasy football comes to the rookie running backs. The first running back didn't come off the board until the 46th overall pick. It was the second round. Jonathan Brooks out of Texas goes to Carolina. And now my top 5 running backs. I'm going to let you guys know who these dudes are, and then we can get your thoughts. So my number 1 running back out of this class, I actually have Trey Benson, the Florida State running back who went to Arizona. James Conner is 29 years old. They lean into him. But Benson's a guy that ran a 4.39 40, explosive after the catch as well. And I think they're going to work that into the offense moving forward. So I have Trey Benson, number 1. Blake Corum is my number 2 running back. Yes, he's the backup for the Los Angeles Rams, running back out of Michigan, coming off a national championship. But this is the seed you planted in my mind, Steve, making sure you get a little bit of certain offenses. And Karen Williams, he's awesome, but he's also missed 12 games the last 2 years, and he's already dealing with a foot issue this offseason. So I think Blake Corum is in position to be successful in an offense that Sean McVay has produced high-level fantasy football play and high-level play out of not elite guys at the running back position. He's my second one. My number 3 is betting on speed, man. Jalen Wright, the running back out of Tennessee to Miami, because this is the looking ahead play, but knowing he's going to get some touches, I think, this year with the speed that he has. Second fastest running back at the combine. Raheem Mostert, he's probably peaked last year. Like, you're not going to see another season like that from Raheem Mostert, and especially Devon Achane in that backfield. Number 4 for me, Rashawn Lloyd, rookie running back out of USC, went to Green Bay, 88th overall pick. He averaged 7.1 yards per carry last year. Now he's going to start number 3 on the depth chart in Green Bay behind Josh Jacobs, who they're talking up as a bell cow running back, A.J. Dillon. But I think Lloyd is someone that can actually surpass Dillon in that pecking order. And if they're going to lean on Josh Jacobs that much, I don't mind kind of hanging on to that insurance handcuff in that Matt LaFleur offense. And number 5 for me would be then Jonathan Brooks. I will give credit to the first running back selected going to Carolina, which it's a wide open running back competition still for the Panthers. Chuba Hubbard is there. Miles Sanders is there. They're 2 guys that would be RB2s anywhere else, not just in fantasy football, but I think on other teams, and they haven't really found one of those guys they like. Now, the thing with Brooks, he tore his ACL last November, so it's going to be a little longer ramp up to that. So those are the top 5 guys that I like in the draft. I have my watch list players. I'll turn it over to you guys on the rookie running backs.
My biggest question is, do you have Jonathan Brooks at 5 because of his talent, his injury, or where he got drafted?
I think Jonathan Brooks was a standout running back at Texas. I moved him back a little coming off the ACL because I do like the explosiveness of the other guys. And even, even if I'm thinking year 2, year 3, I don't know what Carolina's going to be. Where that offense is going to. Are they going to lean into him and like what they're going to be? So I have a little more hesitation on a run back coming off a knee, going into a rough offense that I think that offense could even be rough for the next 2 years.
That's 100% fair. That's why I loved his talent. Like, so Jonathan Brooks as a talent, I loved, and that's why I wanted to know, like, are you worried about? My biggest concern is where he ended, which is he was sitting there when I was picking in our dynasty, and I still didn't take him because for me, I just don't trust Carolina. So I actually agree with your rankings for the
pretty solid.
But because of where they landed, right? Like running backs only have a shelf life of 4 to 5 years, usually, especially in Dynasty. So I have Jonathan Brooks down for that reason because of his landing spot, which is also why I had Jaylen Wright higher because of his landing spot. Blake Corum, same thing. So I actually agreed with your rankings purely because their landing spots ended up kind of fitting, and you know that, hey, they're most likely going to get looks and work. Jonathan Brooks is the hardest one for me to kind of figure out, though, purely because I do love. He should have been the first running back drafted, even coming off that ACL tear. He's the most talented. He looked the best, but he is coming off an ACL tear, and he went to Carolina. And if we're being honest, Carolina is just a dumpster fire.
It's murky.
I don't know what they do and don't have. I feel they kind of the same way about anybody in New England. I don't know what they are. I don't know where I should feel on them. So I'm kind of out on those two teams, which most likely I'm going to be out. If one of them hits, that's great. I hope Jonathan Brooks kills it, but I'm kind of the same. I'm a huge Blake Corum fan because, like we talked about, and I also love Jaylen Wright. The Dolphin bias kind of hits a little bit, but I love his speed and I love what McDaniels is doing. He keeps drafting running backs, which tells me he just wants to find that guy.
Yeah, and hopefully he's him. I was like, you guys have had great running backs pop off, and if they stay healthy, you guys are a menace. So.
Well, and he's willing to use the running backs in multiple ways. We know that we've seen the passing game, be hyper focused, and it's going to continue to be that way, especially with Waddle getting his contract extension, so he's locked in with Tyreek Hill. But the one area that you can look past the top two, I think, is that running back, and I think Mostert, Achane, and Wright are all rosterable players because of just how explosive that offense can be, and Wright backing up at the second fastest 40 at the combine. Now,
and real quick to piggyback, Mostert missed 2 games last season, and Achane missed 4. So all the running backs in Miami are slight. So at some point, somebody's going to be hurt. If you can get all of the pieces at the right price, it's not a bad backfield to just kind of piggyback on and hope you figure out who's going to be that guy.
Jaylen Wright too, and he comes in, he's 21 years old, and look at Wright is 21, Benson Brooks 21, Corum is 23, and Marshawn Lloyd is 23. So just some of the ages of those running backs coming in. Some guys that are on my watch list right now. I'm debating, do I want to put them on my roster or not? I'm going to start with Braylon Allen, 20-year-old running back out of Wisconsin. He was picked in the 4th round, 134th over by the New York Jets. We're talking about a classic Wisconsin back. So Ron Dane, Jonathan Taylor, James White. Now, those are all different styles, but what Allen did was he had 1,000 yards rushing as a freshman. Those guys did it, and he was one to do it as well. At Wisconsin, they feed running backs, and much like we look at Iowa and tight ends, it's Wisconsin and running backs. Like, keep an eye on this dude because they're good, and he can produce, and he could actually end up being the RB2 in the New York Jets behind Hall, and we'll see how that offense shapes up. Because I don't think just because Aaron Rodgers is back that they're going to air it out 25, 30, 35 times a game with Rodgers. Another one that interests me is Audric Estime, the Broncos rookie running back. Now, he did have a knee scope procedure, but they're expecting him to be a full go for training camp. But he's 21 years old, 5th round pick coming out of Notre Dame, 18 rushing touchdowns last season, but a lot of people are talking that he can fit that Mark Ingram style of running back in a Sean Payton offense. And we watched Mark Ingram when he's in the Sean Payton offense get touchdowns. And if he is someone that the Broncos and Sean Payton trust, I think we could definitely see a split possible with him and Javonte Williams. And then another one, like, I know Derrick Henry is in Baltimore. That they have the rookie last year is coming off an injury, but Rasheen Ali went in the 5th round out of Marshall. He ruptured his bicep in the Senior Bowl, but he was a super productive back in Marshall, so he's someone I'll keep on the watch list. Any Baltimore running back, and lastly, a sneaky one is Tyrone Tracy. And why is he sneaky for me? He was a 5th round pick in the Giants out of Purdue because he was a wide receiver that they moved to running back last year. And the New York Giants are going to be looking for playmakers. Yes, they have Malik Neighbors, but Saquon Barkley is gone. And someone other than Malik Neighbors is going to have to touch the football. And what Tracy is interesting to me is he could be that dual threat player that they line up in the slot. He's in the backfield. And I think he's probably someone that can handle kickoff routine duties for the New York Giants. But those are some of the other names that interest me. But just when it comes to rookie running backs, what are you guys looking for? Is it the handcuff? Is it early opportunity? What are you looking for if you want to put a rookie running back on your roster?
When I'm drafting rookie running backs, I'm looking because, like I said, I only look at them as 4 to 5 years. I don't feel like I'm going to get a lot of time out of them. So I want the opportunity to be there. And I also want the team fit to be there. Just because unlike wide receivers where I'm drafting them based purely on talent, not so much in Dynasty, I don't really care about the situation they go to as much as I care about the talent. I don't feel the same way about rookie running backs because you just don't get as many miles out of running backs, right? Like that's what we're at. So when I'm drafting them, I want to make sure I'm getting the guy that has the best opportunity and fastest and it isn't a good fit.
Yeah, that's well said for Dynasty, Steve.
Right. Yeah. I'm not in different leagues. Like if we're not doing a Dynasty league, then yeah, I'm going to look at just opportunity, but Dynasty, I want those other two things to be there as well.
Before we get to everyone's favorite, and that's everyone wants to talk about, it's the wide receivers. Let's talk about the tight ends. And, well, there's one tight end that's draftable because it's the best tight end in the draft. It is Brock Bowers, rookie tight end out of Georgia, 13th overall pick to the Las Vegas Raiders. And, yes, they have a 2nd-round pick there from last year, Michael Mayer, at tight end. But when you have the head coach of the Raiders, Antonio Pierce, saying that his performance at Georgia was just different. Quote, I mean, you're talking about probably the most dynamic player in college football at the tight end position in a long time. That's high praise. That's why they took him at 13. That's why he could be, to me, a 1st-round pick in dynasty drafts. No problem, because I think this is a guy that has, in year 1, a Dalton Kincaid-like ceiling, and that's flirting with the top 10 and 12 finish in fantasy football. They're going to get him the ball. And using Steve's formula of top 2 targets, I could see in an offense with Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers. And yeah, they brought in Michael Gallup for depth, and you have Michael Miller there, that Bowers becomes the number 2 target for the Raiders.
I agree with that. I do want to point out, though, Ben Sinnott for Washington is still a good tight end that was a rookie.
Yeah,
but,
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah,
That was literally who my cursor's over.
But
he's going to be interesting, though, because he's more of a H-back, and so I wonder how much impact he's going to have in the passing game.
I think he feels like the red zone guy. That's how I kind of view him, which when we're looking at tight ends that could develop, he gives me George Kittle vibes. I don't think he's going to be George Kittle, right? But a good blocking tight end that can catch, because we saw him do it. So can that translate in the NFL? A blocking tight end will get on the field. All you have to do is develop a good route tree, which is super possible. But you're drafting that long term. Like we're looking at him as like a 3 to 4 year project, where Brock Bowers is legitimately
away.
has a chance to be a top 5 tight end this year. And that's how I view him. He should have been a top 5. He should be a top 5 pick in everything except for super flex leagues. And even then, I wouldn't argue with you if you took him after Marvin Harrison Jr. Like if you said I need a tight end and he's your second best player, I would not argue with you. I took Dalton Kincaid with that same ceiling last year way earlier, just because I wanted to get a rookie tight end and be good at that position for a while.
Yeah, that's a good point with Bowers. Is he someone that, depending on your roster makeup, could challenge to be a top 4 or 5 pick in dynasty leagues? Now you mentioned Sennett, who was the second tight end selected. The guys that I kind of had on my watch list, because it goes to an offense that we were just discussing maybe stay away from. But in the 4th round, Jatavion Sanders, tight end out of Texas, he went to Carolina. And it's just that they need to find playmakers somewhere. And for Sanders, he's 6'4", 245. The games I watched when he was at Texas, he was a focal point of their offense. He's Quentin Ewers would lean on him a lot. He's a seam stretcher tight end. He's someone that I would watch for. And also Theo Johnson to the New York Giants. Out of Penn State, running a 4.5 40. So he's got straight line athleticism. In fact, in 2022, averaged 16.4 yards per catch. So he's a tight end with some upside, and Daniel Jones and that offense without Darren Waller. Like what decision he's going to make? I don't know. Has he made a decision yet?
I don't think so.
I think he's going to make the decision after June 1st to save the Giants some money, but it sounds like he's going to retire.
Yeah. So I think that's an opportunity for a pass catching tight end in an offense that Brian Daboll is going to be scheming in new players to try to be explosive for Daniel Jones. So Sanders and Johnson, a couple guys that have probably in that same area that you guys have with Sennett as, all right, could they be productive sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I think when you project tight ends, you have to remember, especially rookies, there's a larger learning curve. So you don't usually see rookie tight ends produce. You see second and third year tight ends start to produce. So you draft them and you just kind of go, hey, this guy's going to sit on my bench for a year and hopefully next year he's good. Brock Bowers.
I think that what tight ends would probably be the one position I might sit on the longest.
Yeah.
In Dynasty. Like I'm probably pulling the trigger a little quicker on some of the running backs, wide receivers outside of the guys that I deem elite. Where, man, you got to be patient at tight end.
Tight ends have to learn 2 different jobs. They have to learn how to block, because you're not going to get on the field you can't block, and you have to learn how to run routes. It's probably one of the harder positions for rookies to come in and do. And we kind of saw it with Dalton Kincaid. They didn't make him block a lot last year. They just said, you know what, go be a pass catcher. And that's why he ended up producing so well. But he's kind of the exception, not the norm. Brock Bowers will kind of run into that as well.
Yeah. And even, let's say like a Sam Laporta coming on and exploring that scene.
Yeah, we can't expect Laporta to be that. Like I've never seen that before, right? We thought Kyle Pitts could be that guy and he wasn't. Dalton Kincaid was supposed to be that guy and he wasn't. As well as Laporta. Laporta is he's the unique exception that, I mean, Detroit's just doing good stuff down there. So they knew how to use him properly.
All right. Everyone's favorite time.
Offensive line.
Oh, well, if we were building a football team, we could talk about offensive linemen. If we're doing a real NFL draft, but this is fantasy football, and it's all in on the Dynasty talk. And when it comes to wide receivers, to me, it's pretty easy. You can't mess up the top. If you want to have it the same order as they were drafted, don't have a big argument. But I'll give my top 5. I got my top 12, but we'll start with the top 5. So I have Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, Keon Coleman, Xavier Worthy in my top 5 right now. And this is some of the thought process of don't get over focused on the now. Think about the long term, because I think Keon Coleman could be the number 2 rookie wide receiver. out behind Marvin Harrison Jr., but I think Odunze and Neighbors have that also true wide receiver one ceiling. So that's why I have it ranked that way. But I think these guys are going to be very interesting. It's easily the top 4 picks or top 3 picks right there in fantasy drafts are the first 3 receivers that have been off the board. And then I do think that it is an interesting conversation after the top 3 because there's a lot of people the way I feel about Coleman, they feel that way about Worthy, the first round wide receivers.
So I'm going to tell you honestly, draft day came. I had the same top 3. I actually had it Brian Thomas and then Keon Coleman, and then draft came. Brian Thomas was still sitting there, and I took Keon Coleman. There's just like you get in that position where you're just like, what do I want to do? And I ended up taking Keon Coleman. So I switched it where now I have Keon Coleman ranked higher. I love Brian Thomas though. Like he's one of those guys that I think could be long-term really, really good.
Dang it, Steve. Why you got to steal my thunder?
Well, you take him. You go ahead and talk about it. He's on your team.
No,
yeah,
that's literally what I was going to bring up.
In that moment, I agree with you, JJ. I actually have Xavier Worthy as number 6, but I thought I had Brian Thomas higher, and I ended up taking Keon Coleman. So I kind of fell into that, like, Keon Coleman, Josh Allen.
I know. I don't
and I
blame
took
you.
it. So
yeah.
But I don't know if I regret it yet, so we'll see.
We'll find out.
What do you think about Brian Thomas?
I like Brian Thomas a lot, actually. So right where you said, it's like if you had to choose between those two, it is tough. Like JJ laid it out, his rankings are pretty solid. It's like Keon Coleman, I could see. It's Josh Allen's a step up from Trevor Lawrence. That offense with him should outdo Jacksonville's offense, but Jacksonville can produce wide receivers that are productive. So, it'll be interesting to see who ends up being, the wide receiver.
Well, I like Coleman's future and the fact that I think he's going to be their wide receiver one. I think as a rookie, he can step in and play that role. And in Buffalo, they've done a good job of spinning it because they didn't immediately get a name to fill when they traded Stephon Diggs to Houston, saying, the offense runs through Josh Allen. Yeah, it does. And I trust in Josh Allen, but he's also outside of Dalton Kincaid, he's going to find someone else to throw to. And I think Keon Coleman can be that receiver because we're talking about dude 6'3", football speed. Like he makes plays on the football field. And let's talk about Brian Thomas. So I had Donnie Mitchell, Colts rookie, number 6. Brian Thomas was 7th in my rankings. And then I had Xavier Legette out of Carolina, just because Carolina, even in an offense we don't like, they're going to be pushing.
They're going to score, yeah.
Like someone's going to have to get it. And I think they can manufacture some touches for Legette. Then this is where it got a little tough for me. I have Ricky Pearsall because I think it's a long-term play because I think next year he steps into a wide receiver 2 role for the San Francisco 49ers because I think this is the last year that you see Ayuk and Debo together because they're going to have to pay Brock Purdy next offseason. Then I have the Yak King, Malachi Corley, for the New York Jets. Then I have Vlad McConkley, and then Roman Wilson was my 12th receiver in my top 12 rookie wide receivers. But Brian Thomas, he's a guy that's interesting that he was a first-round pick. Press Taylor, the Jags OC, said that he loves his intelligence. He loves his football speed. He's going to fit in. And just straight talent-wise, yeah, Thomas is one of the guys that could easily be a top 4 receiver out of this draft. And now when it comes to Jacksonville, though, when you look at what they do offensively, and I'll throw this one to you, Aaron, too. Yeah, we know Trevor Lawrence can spread the football around. But so now you have Kirk, Gabe Davis, Evan Ingram, Brian Thomas, Travis Etienne. Are we getting to the point of maybe even do the Texans fall into this? Is it, man, we like this offense, but is there going to be enough to believe that, wide receiver 3
spread
can
around,
be an impactful fantasy player in that offense?
Yeah, that's definitely part of the concern. There's just a ton of mouths to feed, and generally it's been, Kirk when he's healthy. So it'd be interesting to see, because we really, in my opinion, don't have a wide receiver one, and that's where Brian Thomas would kind of fill that into, that position possibly. But it is difficult, just like how you said, Houston, everyone's going to be all over Houston, and that one's an interesting one because they have great players, and there's a lot to, have to fill in for getting yards, getting touchdowns. Sure, it'll be there, but it is a little bit concerning because everyone's not going to be fantastic. So someone's going to get the short end of the stick, the short straw, however you want to say it. So now I'm
Now, some of
concerned.
Yeah, and when you look at some of the back end rookie wide receivers, I think it's interesting because a couple of those guys are traditional slot receivers, and Lad McConkey he's 6 foot, but he's going to thrive in the slot. Like, he was a fantastic route runner out of Georgia. Any of the reports that you read, he's going into a Chargers offense that's starving for any pass catcher right now. So I think that's why he is intriguing. But to me, he's kind of like hyper focused on being PPR guy right now, but I think he, depending on what happens, I think he could be on the flex wide receiver 4 radar. Talking about a dude that's fast too, 4.39 40 with a good route tree. Like, Justin Herbert could figure out how to work that in there. And then Malachi Corey. So Aaron Rodgers came out and said that he was his favorite receiver in this draft. Now, I think you could say, all right, like, if you had the opportunity to throw to Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors or one of those guys, but Corley is a dude that I started paying attention to because of Steve Smith Sr. And Steve Smith Sr. knows what the heck he's talking about. Because I've watched videos online, like, he was all over Cooper Kupp coming out when no one else was. And Corley, now, he wasn't ahead of the elite guys in this class, but he was one of Steve Smith Sr.'s favorite wide receivers. And so that's why I'm taking notice. If an NFL legend who's been hitting on these guys is talking about him, Aaron Rodgers is already saying, I thought this dude was one of the best wide receivers in this draft. Like, I'm taking notice of that for sure. And an offense that, Mike Williams is a big play guy, but he's been hurt. And someone outside of Garrett Wilson is going to have to catch passes.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, my favorite was the Pittsburgh's wide receiver. Is it Malik Wilson?
Roman Wilson?
It Roman Wilson? Thank you.
Yeah.
I was combining names there. I loved Roman Wilson only for one reason, really, and not even as a prospect. Not a prospect I even had a lot of. I didn't even know who he was when he was coming out, to be honest. Is Pittsburgh drafts wide receivers in the late rounds and makes them look amazing. They've done it over and over and over again, right? They did it with AB. They did it with George Pickens. They've done it with
Pickens and Deontay Johnson were quality receivers, and Wilson was the 84th overall pick.
Yeah, that's why. But they just, anytime they draft somebody in the later rounds, wide receiver wise, I don't know why they do what they do.
This is talent.
They get them.
He's 5'11", ran a 4.39 40, but opportunity. They traded Deontay Johnson to Carolina.
Yep.
In the offseason. So it's Pickens, it's Freiermuth, it's a new offensive system with Arthur Smith running the show, calling plays for Russell Wilson / Justin Fields if he's going to get on the field. So I think Wilson is there, and that's why I had him at 12 too. Was kind of the talent plus opportunity, and being a third-round wide receiver to me is interesting. When it comes to watch list players, Troy Franklin was someone that jumped out to me, a 4th-round pick for the Broncos, 21-year-old wide receiver. He's a slim guy, 6'2", 176. But last year, who was he catching passes from? Bo Nix at Oregon. So they get to team up. And at Oregon last year, he set single-season records in yards, touchdowns, and 100-yard games. And the Broncos traded Judy. Cortland Sutton wants more money, and I don't think he's going to get more money from Denver. Marvin Mims was kind of a dud in that offense last year, so he could be maybe a year 2 breakout candidate to watch. I think Franklin, if he works his way into the offense, if Sean Payton gives him an opportunity, he could be someone worth having on your roster because he already has that connection with Bo Nix. He's got the size to stretch the field plus production. So he is someone that was actually drafted in our Dynasty League draft, but I would have on my watch list because I think he's probably more of the back end of most Dynasty drafts.
Yeah, I don't have much to add on that one. I agree with you, but he's a wait and see, not a. He's like a third or fourth round pick. That's kind of where I'm drafting him.
Yeah, he's at the back end of Dynasty drafts. Other
Yeah.
names to watch, which could be interesting, and again, it's the year 2 breakout you could be looking for, but Jermaine Burton was the 80th overall selection. So that's third round pick to the Cincinnati Bengals, and he's someone that I don't think he directly steps into the Tyler Boyd role, but we know Cincinnati has liked 3 wide receiver sets. We know Cincinnati only has T. Higgins for 1 more year because the track record is they'll franchise tag a guy and then they will not give him a long-term deal. So this is, I believe, because history has shown it, the last year we will see Jamar Chase and T. Higgins together in Cincinnati. So I think Burton could be interesting, maybe even early opportunity to get in there, but then big breakout potential as being the wide receiver 2 in a Bengals offense. That it's going to have Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow going forward. But it's always interesting too because thinking about dynasty leagues is trying to win versus being patient with some players and then having to mesh those things together to kind of get the full dynasty experience. Because I know for me, when we started up the league that we are in, Steve, the 10-team league, I didn't really draft for the future initially, right? I just straight up drafted a team, tried to win, and then I started focusing on the rookie drafts after it. But what is your mindset as a dynasty league player?
So I actually did the same thing. So that first year, I took Michael Thomas as my first overall pick, which it was the year he got hurt, so it was a great pick, right? I actually 2 years ago I reset my whole team. I traded almost all the talent I had left. I think the only talent I kept was Jaylen Waddle, and just restarted. And if I had to redo it again, I think that would be I'd lean heavier into talent that is young and try to build my team for a long haul, right? I'd rather be the dynasty champion for 4 or 5 years than and have to wait 3 years to get there than win one championship in the beginning and then hope that I can build my team up, because your team gets old fast. You're not going to be drafting high up in the beginning and you're going to miss out on players that are huge, right? So last year I got lucky because one of the trades I made, I got the second overall pick and was able to take Jahmyr Gibbs. So that helped speed up the process of the rebuild. But I actually believe you should draft young in Dynasty to make your team good long term and not worry so much about, my Dynasty, my championship windows right now, because you never know who's going to get hurt. So might as well have as much talent as possible and young talent at that.
With that, gentlemen, let's go into the quick recap of the Dynasty draft that we did have. So we talked about the players we liked, how we ranked them. So how did it play out when it came to our NM Dynasty League? So the top 4 picks: Marvin Harrison, Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, Xavier Worthy. That was an interesting one, going 4th overall. Then Caleb Williams was
that
the 5th
was an auto
pick.
pick. Unfortunately, he auto picked and wasn't there. So,
but still, it's not
terrible.
It's on the edge. So after Caleb Williams, it went Brock Bowers. This one surprised me. Ladd McConkey went ahead of Keon Coleman, which you selected right there, Steve.
Right in front of you.
Yeah, right in front of me. Coleman's been my guy. I was targeting. I thought I could get him for sure at 9 in a 10-team Dynasty League draft. But then I pivoted to Donnie Mitchell. He was my number 2 receiver because the way I had it ranked, I knew, all right, I'm not getting any of those guys. So it was Coleman and Mitchell for me. Then it was Daniels and Leggett at the turn. And I get, the guy in our league is a Panthers fan, but I think Leggett is still at the turn, 11th overall pick in a dynasty draft, when you're looking at someone that I have kind of on the fringe top 7 wide receiver, like I'm good with that. Then I selected Blake Corum, so he was my top rated running back.
Yeah. So hold on real quick. It's not a snake. It's the first overall pick resets in the second round. So it's not backwards. So he got
Straight
like
up.
as the 20th pick.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just
you're
was
good.
reading
You're good.
through all that.
Yeah.
So that's
So-
even better value. Feel even
Yeah.
better about that pick.
Yeah, you got better value.
Or Leggett at the end, because you look at some of the players that went before him, Ricky Pearsall, Brian Thomas. I think it was really good value there, smack dab in the middle
I thought about taking him at 8, so to get him in the second round, I thought was a huge steal.
of the second round. You saw Brian Thomas go there, and then a lot of the run on running back. So it went Benson, then you pick Jalen Wright, which is great. And then Blake Corum went right after that. So we kind of saw the pecking order of how we had those things laid out. And then look at the third round. That's when it got a little tougher, and you start fishing for things. Roman Wilson went there. Jalen Polk, I don't hate it as a third round pick in Dynasty, because Polk, look at the rookie wide receiver for New England. He's coming out of Washington. He was the 37th overall pick. So that's something to keep an eye on. That is a fringe first round wide receiver in a team that is trying to rebuild their offense, and they invested in him high. Polk is someone I think I'm going to sneak in the back end of my watch list moving forward to see if he can develop some chemistry, especially with Drake May moving forward. And then the last receiver that went was Malachi Corey before Senate and Knicks to my team, and then some defensive players. But some of the guys that we talked about, Senate was drafted.
Yeah, I took him. That's why I talked about him. I like him a lot. So.
Jatavion Sanders was a rookie tight end that was selected in our draft. And so I think it's pretty interesting. So it's kind of, when we talk about our rankings and the players we liked, and then looking at how our league handled it, it did kind of flow how we thought. And it's one that I think, especially this year in Dynasty, attack the wide receivers.
Yeah,
like I think it's pretty simple. If you miss out on the top 3, and I think you can put a line after Harrison, Neighbors, and Dunze. Then I could say, all right, you go Bowers, and then you just pepper the rest of the receivers depending on quarterback need.
Yeah, I think sometimes we overthink this, right? Especially in a dynasty. What did the NFL tell us? The NFL said wide receivers are deep, then draft wide receivers in your dynasty. Like last year, we saw 2 running backs go in the first round, and try to get the running backs. Like listen to what the draft's saying, because those guys get paid a lot of money to make those scouting reports, and they're gonna miss, but something's gonna come of it, and that's where you want to draft.
I think that is a good strategy. And as we put a bow on this Dynasty episode, and I think it's fun to look at the rookies first, because it does kind of think of different strategies. I think especially the second half of your redraft leagues, and where you can find that value, because there's so many different styles of leagues out there, which is fascinating. Dynasty where you keep your whole team, leagues where you can keep 1 or 2 players, and so trying to find that balance, especially because what is it going to cost you? And in our league, it costs us the first year the round that you pick the player in. And so that's why I think, when you look at the rookies, and we'll do something too when we look at the second year players, like if you start attacking those guys late in your draft, you can maybe hit on a gem that helps you win a lot of fantasy football games moving forward. But with that being said, gentlemen, it's always fun talking some football. Any closing thoughts on the rookies as we wrap this one up?
Draft wide receivers late in both Dynasty and your normal fantasy drafts.
Yeah, you'll find some diamonds that come out of that late. So
Puka or an Odell or somebody else is going to hit somewhere. That is gonna happen again this year. I don't know who it's gonna be.
Always
Take them.
take the wide receivers late. But it's fun. All right, gentlemen, until next time.
Peace. Later, y'all.